and welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. Today we'll be chatting with someone who is no stranger to ICT Pulse but is joining us for the first time on the podcast. If you are a long-time reader of ICT Pulse, you may recall the Data Adventures series and titles such as Is It a Tricycle or Is It a Lamborghini? Or a discourse on quick wins and project successes. We are thrilled to have on the podcast the author of the Data Adventures series, Liselle Ramcharan-Briscoe. Originally from Trinidad and Tobago but currently based in Canada, Liselle is an electrical and computer engineer who has a particular focus on information management, project management, and software engineering. In sitting down to chat with Liselle, whose last Data Adventures installment with us was published in early 2019, we thought it opportune to catch up with Liselle and discuss, among other things, what new data adventures she has been experiencing, key software engineering, information management, or even project management trends that she has been observing over the last few years, plus the impact of COVID-19 on those areas, and what are some of the biggest challenges businesses are experiencing these days, especially with regard to information management? Liselle, thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. It's good to be here, Michelle.
Great. Long time since we have chatted about data and software engineering, project management, and all the things that you had started to share with us in your data adventures on ICT Pulse.
Yes, it has been a while. It's actually quite surprising. I think between change in my personal career and the pandemic, it's surprising. It's almost as if 2020 didn't happen, but it's been such a huge impact on all of us. So yeah, it has been a while.
Yeah. So probably for those of us who are, in the audience who may not be familiar with you and would have missed some of your articles on, is it a tricycle or a Lamborghini and so on. Give us a sense as to who you are, how you got into your software engineering, project management, and even data management as well.
Yes, it'd be great to definitely fill in those blanks. So personally, I actually started with electrical and computer engineering, and I chose that as my field of study because my father said do engineering, and I knew that I loved computers. And I wouldn't even say that's unfair to him. It's not that he said do engineering, but I knew that I loved computers and I was afraid of electricity. So I saw it as something that I got to face my fears as well as get into something that I love. And in that journey, I discovered software engineering. And for me, software engineering, the thing that stood out the most was that it was all about the end user, right? So the whole idea of the Lamborghini and the bicycle was just that. Like, do you design a Lamborghini, or are you really need a tricycle for a child to be driving? Because you certainly won't give them a Lamborghini. And that opened my eyes to that area. And then the other thing that we were introduced to was project management. And for me, I was given all these tricks and tips to figure out the lead and the lag, etc. But nobody sat and said, okay, but how do you define this project? What are the activities involved in making this project? But needless to say, I think I was bitten by both bugs. So I think for me, what I was very fortunate to experience is even when I moved on to do like my master's, because I did digital systems, but kept a focus on database management, database principles. And of course, I found the project management course. And so if you look at my career in terms of my studies, the areas that I've always been attracted to in terms of jobs, like I actually define a lot of my career as electricity. You're not missed until you're gone. So there are fundamentals that are put in place that you make sure that your project runs smoothly. You make sure that the end user is satisfied. You make sure that the data that allows these things to work are put in place. And it somehow those were, I even had the opportunity to go to Denmark, where I was able to work for an information management company. Like that was like the cherry on the cake for me, because it brought together project management and information management in a meaningful way.
Okay, wonderful. So, in working in the field, and since it has been a while since we chatted, and the ICT Pulse family been exposed to your adventures, can you give us just a sense of some of probably some of the current trends that you have been seeing in the areas that you work in?
So I would say, from a project management perspective, one of the things that I've been pleasantly surprised to see, I attended the PMI conference actually just last week, so even having this conversation is very timely. They focus on people. They focus on process. I mean, it's like all the things that attracted me to this field are the things that people are finally, or at least I hope they are finally appreciating the importance of. And I read some comments where people are, and project manager, the professionals really in the field are saying, well, some of these things are no-brainers, but we're not seeing the evidence in the statistics. So, for example, one of the numbers they gave was that projects, they're like a 30% success rate. And then with the whole idea of digital, because everybody is about digital transformation these days with the projects. And really, it's transformation, whether it's digital or not, it doesn't matter. You need to make sure that you know your process, you know the people, you know your end user, and use those areas in order to allow the project to be successful. So if you don't, for example, pull in the people in your company who are actually engaged in providing a service to your customers, and that they are part of the process, and they feel, and again, that's the organizational change management that also is a theme that came out for me, that you end up not having, that's why your projects aren't successful. It's not about the tools that are out there. It's not that people don't know what they're doing or they understand, or there will always be a resistance to change. But you have to involve the people in order to make it successful. And that was an overarching theme that I found for the last conference. And it was nice to see that the topics were focused on those. So, your leadership, etc. Or maybe I was attracted to those, who knows. The thing is, inherently, we know it. I don't know why, as a society, we somehow seem to have separated the way that we have been able to be successful in outside of the job arena to the way that we are inside, and vice versa. So that was certainly great to see. And then from a data perspective, information management perspective, and that may also just be because of the people that I see and the profiles that I follow, really getting back to the basics of, yes, all these tools are great, but let's keep it simple. Let's understand what people are trying to achieve. Let's make sure that our data is in shape, because I heard a really powerful, at least it was for me, a powerful statement that application of technology exposes your deficiencies, right? And it's so true. When you try to put in these transformational or supposedly transformational projects, and you're so excited because the end result really should be good. Don't get me wrong. Like when you use the tool and you use it well, it can make a difference. But if you don't have, for example, the email addresses that you need to send the verification codes slash one-time passwords, then it doesn't matter what the technology is because your basic fundamentals of your data is not present. So it's good to see those sorts of conversations. And for me, that feeds in even to the hot topic or the topic du jour with regards to open banking. Because when we start looking at what open banking means and that integration of data and the standardizations that you would need to have, yes, you talk about APIs because the APIs, you can present the data in the correct format, for want of a better phrase. But what do you have underlying in your backends to pull that data together for it to be available through APIs? So I feel a lot of the trends with regards to the digitization and the fact that even because we're working from home, it's important to, suddenly we see the deficiencies in the internet. And I shouldn't even say the internet, but just with regards to the speeds, right? And the idea of have we considered the bandwidth and have we considered doing, and therefore how, and for me, the importance of using the project management and the data management / information management in order to succeed. And I feel that all those topics are still out there, they're still relevant, and that we're seeing how important it is to actually pay attention. And these are things that there is a cost to it, but if you don't make sure that you're heading in the right direction with it, then you're going to end up you're going against rough waters already as it is. Give yourself the right pathway or the right tools to get to your destination.
Wow, all of what you said just brought up so many questions. And probably just to start and just to clarify, when you say open banking, what do you mean? Because it may not necessarily be something we in the Caribbean are experiencing at this point in time.
Okay, so I would say, for me, simply open banking is the opportunity for banks and fintechs to share their data. And this is something that started out of the UK because what they had found was that when they looked at personal checking accounts, there are a lot of customers who weren't getting the best service for their money. And so perhaps there were cheaper fees that they could be paying on the accounts. And that has evolved. So there was a huge study done in the UK, and it evolved into, the standardization of the data, being able to share the data, rules around you must make the data available because the data doesn't belong to you as a bank, but it belongs to the card holder or the customer, and therefore you should allow them to pool that data, and the fintechs who are willing to do it, to give the cardholder the best bang for their buck. So I think a simple example would be, you would probably notice there's a lot of folks in the UK, there's a lot of, so with mining the data, they realize, for example, that one person isn't paying the cheapest rate for their utilities, and there's actually something better. So in starting that project with the checkings and being able to offer the cardholders a better fee, it's evolved now into competitive pricing, looking at people's data and saying, is this the best, and allowing the sharing of the basic information of the cardholder. And the fact that they use these utilities or services and allowing them to easier move, because one of the big things when you have to move from one bank to the other is even sharing your history or even sharing some basic information. So they have a lot of rules and regulations around that in the UK, and that has evolved and it's spread to different parts of the world. The US has started some initiatives, definitely Canada, where I'm based, Australia. So that is the future. Definitely with regards to open banking. I'm sure it's not going to take long for the Caribbean to fully to get there, because there are enough people who are aware and recognize the benefits of it. What I think is similar to the Caribbean, similar to Canada and the FIs here, there would be some resistance with regards to which parts of the data belong to whom. But the whole idea of the data really belongs to the cardholder, and let the data be available so that, one, more creative services would be available through the fintech solutions that are there, and two, that there's so much of a monopoly in a lot of ways with regards to the service offerings, and really give the cardholder, give customers the ability to make the best of their money, their investments, and even doing simple things that aren't so simple of paying your bills.
That's so true. But actually, when you were saying that you think that maybe the Caribbean will come on stream with things like that pretty soon, I wasn't so confident. But I was also realizing though that we are having a number of data protection pieces of legislation enacted across the region. So the whole issue as to who owns the data and the responsibilities therein, maybe those things may help to sort of shift the needle a little bit. And as you said, sometimes the very sort of protectionist posture that a lot of our banks have adopted, may be lessened to the benefit of consumers. But I guess we'll have to just watch this space and see.
Yes, and I think one of the things I've observed, for example, and it might seem simple, but I think it really emphasizes what as we influence each other. So so there was a particular institution in Trinidad that I wanted to send funds to, and because of the limitations with the technology, I wasn't able to, right? And it was very disappointing to me. But I would say because of the pandemic, all these things have been the ability of the technologies and the use of it, because people from outside of Trinidad want to send things to Trinidad. They want to be able to connect. That now they actually put up, I think it's like a shopping. It's presented as like you're shopping for something, but it actually allows you to pay to buy a product from Canada in order to send money to the institution. So yes, there's an overhead, but the creativity in coming up with a solution in order to provide a service to someone outside of the Caribbean, into the Caribbean, it's there. And I think that the appeal and the need for it is going to drive, even for us in the Caribbean, some of the advances that we would see. So, hearing you talk about the legislation and seeing some of the new services that are available from a technical perspective, I feel we're going to get there. And we may both be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. But you mentioned the pandemic as well, have you observed any sort of changes in how your areas of expertise, sort of methodologies or approaches, or even, how people consider things just based on the pandemic and the imperatives that emerged coming out of that situation? And I guess that we're still grappling with to some degree.
Mm-hmm. And I think for me, it's more of it's the social aspect of it. I think another term that I picked up just last week with the PMI conference was a term called functional depression. And I was chatting with a colleague of mine, and we said, okay, maybe we should expand that to the whole idea of organizational depression. So I feel that in some ways we are continuing to do what we need to do, and we're trying to figure out the workarounds to have the phone calls and to have the Zoom calls and have the coffee chats. But I feel that there's a better of appreciation for the technology and the things that are there and the theories that are there. But I feel that the pandemic has brought out the importance of the social aspect of it. That, this whole idea of social distancing, I've always been against it. I feel it's more of it's a physical distancing. And in some ways, even though people are reading more and they are closer to a lot of things that are happening in general with regards to the technology, the number of us who are logging into all these different conferences around the world, and just our ability to access the information, that piece is good. But I feel that the explosion of what is to come once we're able to be back at some hopefully new version of our current world, because there's been so much benefit for some people to be able to work from home. But we're social creatures, and the psychologists and everybody have said, yes, this is all well and good. And even if you think about Canada, they've said, but we need to get the kids in school, because there's an element to that. And I think that brings about the creativity. And I don't necessarily feel that I'm seeing more creativity. I feel that we're better understanding what we have now and how we can make better use of the tools that we have. I don't know if that makes sense to you in terms of how I'm delivering, but yes, I think that's my observation.
Well, it's interesting that you said you may not necessarily be seeing greater creativity, and I think probably in you saying it, and me sort of thinking it through, that a lot of our creativity comes from collaboration, whether or not it's actually in the actual process of creativity or in stimulating ideas. So
Yes.
you may, as an individual, may be the one to have the idea, but it probably comes from stimulus that you have received from interacting with people, from them sharing their opinions, from talking with customers, and so on and so forth. And so things like that don't necessarily just happen in a vacuum, or rarely happen in a vacuum.
Right. And so, and I'm not taking away, like, it was very, like, I'm not taking away from so for example, with the example that I gave with, at least, like, I see the creative use of the technologies, but it's not that those weren't there before. It's saying, okay, I know that there's this need. There are things that were there before, like we take it and we can provide a solution. And it's almost, I think, one of the things that I think we've all learned is that it's almost like desperation causes us to create some things. But I feel in terms of like the innovation per se, I don't know that. I remember having to work through just a database solution that we have. And it was one of the first times that I missed being able to just draw it out on a whiteboard and explain what I saw was there and where we needed to move from there. Because I guess it's cute that we could draw these things online, but it's just not the same as having, at least for me. I know there's some people who love their computer and their tablets and so on. But you know what? I love a book that is printed, and I love a big whiteboard, or like a big piece of paper. Like, even if I have to put something in a document, I still scribble, and what I do think actually kind of related but unrelated is that people have definitely tapped into their more creative side in terms of painting and expressing how they feel now. But I feel in terms of the innovation with the technology, there's some things that there's better appreciation for as I like to say, the fundamentals. And I feel and that we're there, like we recognize the need, and it's probably a bad expression to use, but like desperation is the mother of invention.
Right.
So there's some things that we may, but I think there might actually be an explosion of that innovation and collaboration when some of us are able to actually be together in a room. Again, to just to share the ideas and the excitement of having your colleagues and the like-minded people who you could connect in person. There's nothing like eye contact There's nothing like a facial expression, because that's the thing. One of the things I miss, being able to say, okay, am I reaching this person? Like you can, there's some aspects of someone's expressions that you can't get through this electronic means, as beautiful and as high definition as some of the connections can be. It's just not the same.
That's so true. And I guess especially just going back to one of your very early points about, the importance of people, for your projects and being able to engage people, be it the team or
Yes,
the end users. So that I think makes perfect sense. And sometimes we as individuals, you may not, something might sit well with you, but you don't necessarily want to say something, but you kind of win, so you give some sort of facial expression. And
exactly.
the person may not be able to get that if they're looking at you online, but because sometimes you don't even have your camera on, but in person, that sort of energy may come up, and it's as subtle as that, but it may prompt you to revisit a situation or to delve in a little bit
Exactly.
more or something.
Yes, that's exactly it.
So just going back to some of the articles that you published on ICT Pulse, and we had termed them data adventures. So you had published three, but I just wanted to know, I mean, one of them was businesses should always drive technology. You spoke about logical data models and the importance of quick wins. But, what have been some of your recent data adventures? Are there any sort of nuggets and gems that we can take away from you today?
What a nugget I'd like to give is with regards to data quality, and I think because the whole idea of that we're in the digital space and this whole digital transformation, it's a transformation. It's we need to be able to cope in this. I don't even like to call it a new reality, but that our focus channel right now is certainly through the calls and having to be online. And what I would say is, one, more people need to understand the difference between data quality and data integrity. And what I had recently, I actually sent like a description to my colleagues saying, this is the difference between data quality and data integrity. And it's simply this: so is there that time sometimes degrades the quality of the data, but it doesn't mean that when it was first created that it was not well done. And the simplest example I would give is an email address. And I know that that seems to be the go-to example, but I think so many people could relate to it. I remember having a Hotmail email address years ago. So I am sure when I signed up for anything back in the day, that Hotmail address would be there. It's still relevant. Like it's from a structural perspective, and the fact that it was data, it is still there. But is it current? Right? It's no longer current. If you think about, there's some industries that, I think of my credit union. Certainly when I joined the credit union, my parents signed me up for it. I don't want to date myself. Um, they didn't have email address and an email address to put in, and certainly I didn't. So I think we need to remember the purpose behind the data and not be too critical when some things aren't there, and that sometimes the as I like to use the term journey, so I'll keep stick with that. The journey of getting that data up to the standard, and I use air quotes, that you want it to be, doesn't necessarily have to lie with technology itself. And so one of the things that I greatly appreciated, and even outside of my own job, is just that we need to appreciate, and I guess again bringing in the people aspect of it, to say you call in, that email addresses are an issue. When you talk to that person, oh, by the way, is your information up to date?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel that we really making sure that we don't feel that the solution to a problem is always adding more technology. Sometimes it's just having the conversation, having a plan in order to say, have the competition, have the conversation, but letting your organization know, and again, the importance of people that listen, we need in every area and every aspect to make sure that we have this information up to date, and let it be something that we, as an organization, we want to be collaborative and understand at the end, what is the end result? What does this actually bring to the organization when we have it correct? So it's not about the quality, it's not about the integrity, but it's how do you now get that information in?
Okay. All right. But just going back to the terms data quality and data integrity. So with data integrity, at least from what you're saying, I feel as if it suggests to me that you're probably looking at the methodology, the the principles behind the methodology that have been applied to collect the data versus the quality, which may speak more to the extent to which it can be used.
Yes.
Okay.
And so now I think what it is that you don't, like, data quality shouldn't take away from data integrity.
Right.
But particularly when you're talking about transformation and the importance of getting certain data elements, I think let's stay away from the data integrity, like the integrity of this data is questionable. Well, no, it's not the integrity of the data that is questionable. It is that time has changed. What the focus of the business back 20, 30 years ago is different. And some data elements weren't as important to the business as they are now. And so as an organization, are you keeping up with the changing needs of even your own organization? So it goes back to, like, when I looked at, like, the logical data models and capturing your business rules, and recognizing that as the demands for your of your business change, that your data needs will change, and therefore you should start putting a strategy in place for those pieces that are important. But let's stop knocking others if their data isn't up to par, right? Let's figure out the reason why it isn't and what strategy we're putting in place in order for it to get there.
And I guess for all intents and purposes, data integrity probably will come first, would be your first consideration before you look at data quality, because I guess I'm thinking though that data integrity will drive the data quality. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are actually the other way around. I think your data quality, you would want to have a strategy to ensure that the quality of what exists is sound, and then but in parallel, the integrity must be there. So it goes again back to those business rules to say, in collecting the data, in making sure that your pieces are there, do you have the structural pieces in place to capture the data, right? So yes, the email addresses weren't accurate. You have made the changes. You have made sure that you put it into this system. Is that data now propagating to the other systems, right? Are you making sure that when someone calls in on the phone and they give that piece of information to the customer service rep, that the customer service rep is able to not only update that in the customer, the CRM system, but that perhaps, like in your banking host system in the back end, that there's some connection between those two systems that makes sure that that information is there as well, right? So for me, in terms of the integrity ends up being a bigger piece, or thinking of a bigger piece of the puzzle, where it's now not just having that element, but having that element available correctly and accurately in the other systems in which it can also be found. Does that make sense?
Understood. Yeah. But I'm also thinking in another permutation, because it's all well and good when one is thinking about sort of like, and I say discrete data points. So an email address, somebody's address, some sort of tax number. But what about, let's say, if you're doing within the operations of a business and you are now collecting data. So you may be collecting various data points in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the like the categories or the headings, but then frequency. So for
Mm-hmm.
example, so you may have a large number of data points, let's say whether it's sales and categories of items that are being sold, or whether it's social media and all of the things that people
Right.
like to measure engagement and reach and so on. How then do you look at data integrity and data quality in those sorts of settings?
Yeah. And so I would say for me then the data integrity comes around along with, have we defined the what those data points actually mean, right? And therefore are we able to even capture the right data points so that when somebody makes so thinking of like business intelligence, what are when that analysis is done, are the conclusions correct? Because have we, let's say we look at the sales for pencils, right? Like, yes, we've sold 1 million pencils, and we're all happy about that. But did we make sure that we looked at what the profit margin ended up being, or that we looked at the cost of getting those pencils out there? Right? So then for me, the integrity of the data becomes more important, because you want to know that in capturing the data, you've now captured all the data points that allow that data to be reliable, that allow you to, and reliable from the sense of analytics now, right? That allow you to say with some degree of confidence that what my calculation is correct, because not only did we made sure that we captured the process correctly, we collected the right data points, and we're using the right tools that allow us to do that analysis. So for me, the integrity now and how that fits into the bigger picture and other things that can be done is, again, you need to go back to your logical data model as well, because even with these, and then you started, I know I had hedged a bit on the whole topic. We were asked the question anyway about the data marts, right? And the whole idea that once you have the logical data model, and you know that you've captured the business rules correctly and effectively, how then do your data marts come into the picture? And the whole idea of like the dimensional modeling, etc. That yes, once the foundation of your business rules are sound, and then you take that and extrapolate it to whatever model you need to see in your data mart, then are you then capturing the right data points that allow you to come to the right conclusion as a result?
Okay. So then how does data quality fit into the scenario that I shared? So we spoke about data integrity, but
Yeah.
quality of the data.
So one of the things, and I know a lot of times and in having the conversation is going from old to new. And now when we talk about the data integrity and the data quality in this setting, then from a data quality perspective, have you defined your elements correctly? Have you ensured that you minimized any chance of error? And so again, simply going back to the email address, if somebody were to put in an email address and there's not an at and a dot, you can flag that for as an error, right?
Yes.
If you think about phone numbers, if you don't have the 10 digits, because you want to think on a global scale, or with the Europeans they have even more, like are you looking at, let's say, the country in order to determine what that phone number format needs to be? So in designing your new systems, and you want to ensure that from a data quality perspective that you are putting in controls that ensure that as best as possible that the right information is going in as it's collected. And yes, there's some checks that you can't necessarily do at that point. So then, do you have other controls at your data level, your database level, that can flag if the logic of some data element doesn't add up? So, for example, your format might be correct in entering the details of a customer, but then when you look at in your database, and somebody is now looking or has been given a product, but the person actually isn't legally allowed that product because they're living in Italy and not in Canada, or they're living in Jamaica, not in Trinidad, and therefore they should not have been allowed to have that product. So there's a lot of basic error handling things that can be done, or error handling checks that can be done with regard to the data entry. And then in order to add even more, to enhance the quality even more, I would say putting all those checks within your database, your and other tools that you may have that can flag errors, flag inconsistencies that you may need to follow up on. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that from an integrity perspective, like we did the wrong thing. Maybe that check wasn't there before. So it allows you to keep improving your system. And for me, the data quality and the data integrity now become a matter of if you want to keep up your standards, are you checking the quality of your data so you don't have to keep fixing things as you enter? Like, try to have it as clean as possible so it minimizes any sort of cleanup, follow-up, etc. that you need to do.
That's so true. Wow, yeah. At least, that's such an excellent explanation, because I think so many of us who probably certainly are not deep into data management and so on, but we from time to time we are called on to do some sort of analysis or analytics, and sometimes we don't necessarily appreciate the questions that we probably need to be asking before we actively start to interrogate the data, because it's almost as if you need to understand that context before you dive in to being manipulating the data, because you need to ensure that from the outset that the data is sound and that it is accurate in terms of what you hope it represents, relative to what you need.
Exactly. And I think, again, going from the old to the new, what happened a lot is that because we didn't have as much flexibility and I would say different models available to us, often people would force data into a pre-described structure that didn't necessarily fit the product. And if you aren't there in the organization to understand that journey with the data. So one of the examples that comes to mind is, it's a financial one as well, where a system was created to capture, let's say, credit cards. But they realized that the data that they were able to mine from that system, they wanted to add more products. So they added more products, and there was a credit card status. And the values for that work for the credit card, but it may not work for the checking account. And because there was not flexibility to add another field, the name of the field stayed the same, but the values in there were different. And if you're putting the information from one system into the other, and you're not making sure that you have some definition, whether it is something that you have in a document that people need to be reminded to reference to check, or that in loading that information into the your data warehouse, that you don't make sure that you run a check, you can end up with inconsistencies in the data. You could end up with people reading a field and expecting it to be one value and it's another, and they're not understanding why the results aren't the way that they need to be.
That's absolutely true. And was there not in my head while you're talking? All right. So, I think we need to sort of pivot a little bit, but same, not necessarily on data quality and data integrity, but it really now has me thinking just generally about, the challenges that businesses experiences or organizations tend to experience when, looking at, whether it's information management, data analytics, or, even, developing projects in various teams. So what might be some of the challenges you have observed, or you think that businesses probably need to be on the lookout for?
I would say I use a young person expression. Um, don't use a mop for the ocean,
Mm-mm. All right.
right? So um, don't let the available technologies, don't let the like all, don't let the need to feel as you need to keep on top of the emerging trends stop you from remembering the fundamentals of your business. And I say that because, again, I'm going to be dating myself here. But I remember, and you would remember Professor King.
Right. Yes.
I was, he was asked to do a presentation on e-commerce, and he asked me to help with presenting the paper. And so I was doing the research and getting all the information. And so, it was e-commerce and we were all excited about it. And but I started reading articles because when I started this discussion today, I'm an engineer, right?
Mm.
Like I'm all about logic, etc. The business, even though we are taught some, it wasn't necessarily the highlight or the most important thing for the course, right? For the program. So I started reading. And someone said, listen, it's all well and good to get into the e-commerce, and moving away from the brick and mortar into the online space. But remember that your business fundamentals still remain, and that what makes a business successful hasn't changed because you're now online. So your ability to deliver your goods in a timely manner, where you're storing them, how are you reaching to your customer, all these things, they haven't changed. And there was one of the examples that they had used back then to make people all excited is somebody was online, they ordered Baskin Robbins from the local ice cream shop. So they went online, they placed the order, and everybody was all excited because the ice cream showed up. But how does that end up magnifying on a global scale? So I think one of the things that we need to be really careful about is that with all these things that are happening, you know what the core of your business is. You know the things that are important to you. You know the drivers that make your business a success. Don't forget that. Make sure you meet with like-minded people. Make sure you get the ideas that make that piece successful, and then apply the tools. Then say, okay, based on what this is and what my product is offering, what's the best way for me to get to my ideal customer? Because those things still matter. It still matters. You're not going to, and it go back to my Lamborghini and car example, you're not going to sell a Lamborghini to a parent who has a 5-year-old, right? Because it's just not going to work unless it's a toy car. So make sure that you don't forget the core of your business, what made you passionate about starting it in the first place, what business rules apply. Don't be afraid to step out. And maybe I'm talking to myself with some of these things. Don't be afraid to really understand what you need to do. And once you have that model, then figure out what technology works. The whole idea of project management and having a defined scope and figuring out the pieces that you need to get you there, looking back, doing the evaluation, doing lessons learned, all those things that I just said there, everybody can could appreciate and use and find value in any business space that they are in. If you have data and you need to understand who your customer is, have the proper inventory of your products, etc., anybody recognizes how those pieces fit in with their business. But understand what that is, understand how to capture that information, understand how you can't measure the success of what you're doing if you don't have some piece of information that allows you to say, hey, right, this, I did it because, listen, when I looked at I have, so like masks is a big thing now. I said I was going to sell my mask, and this is the amount of time I'm going to spend to stitch it, and this is the amount of material and the cost of the material, and this, and that she sat down and did that analysis before you sold the product, right? And now that you have a quality product, word of mouth might be enough, as opposed to everything in social media. So, don't allow the glitter to take away from what's underneath, because sometimes, as they say, all that glitters isn't gold.
That's so true. But I was also thinking as you're talking and looking more from the Caribbean context and experience, certainly I sometimes wonder whether or not, business owners and so on understand what their businesses are truly about. You might be selling masks, for example, but is it really the thing that you're selling? What you're selling might be, peace of mind. It is some sort of protective gear and so on, and the way we think about it, and therefore our approach to business may also affect how we see it and how we then look at the tools that we can be using to leverage and improve the business and the quality and what we are supposed to be delivering, and not necessarily what we think we are delivering.
Exactly. And no, and that's the thing I want, and because the thing of it is, if you understand your market, then you know which pieces of those become more important, and therefore what direction or what you need to be focused on.
Yeah. And also coming just back from the points that you were making, I was thinking about it from the pandemic perspective, because I think for so many businesses, you were happy to, set up your little shop and people came and bought, in person to buy from you. But that may no longer be possible to the degree that you would like. And therefore, a lot of businesses, I think, were scrambling at the start of the pandemic to figure out how could they pivot. I don't even know if they were thinking about pivoting, but it was such a crisis for them, and it was really just about what can I do, but not necessarily being able to sit down and think strategically about the fact that I was depending on walk-in customers for so long that I never explored other aspects and other avenues. And that, I think is also something that, I guess, lessons that we have probably begun to learn through the pandemic. But as you rightfully said, all that glitters isn't gold. And, to the extent that sometimes we may want to be someone who prides ourselves on being on top of technology, and any little thing that comes out, we're trying to figure out how to use it and integrate it, and whether or not, or the extent to which it actually adds value.
Exactly.
I think that's something to think about as well.
No, I couldn't agree more. Because there was what came to mind, even as I gave that example, was that I had a conversation with two businesswomen in Trinidad, because I had done this introduction to project management course, and I really had targeted it to small business. And they were excited about this business idea. I said, I'm happy to talk to you about it. And what they were trying to do was basically take advantage of this whole, selling things online through a portal. And at the end of the conversation, I said, listen, I think, when you think about the logistics and bringing the items in, and the costs, and who your competition, and what's the overhead, and how could you guarantee your supply chain, I don't know that it's necessarily I think you need to keep it as a side business, because their core business, one of the ladies was apparently an excellent caterer. She's an excellent chef. And so she did catering, and she had her niche market, and actually had figured out how best to work through the pandemic and get the things delivered. And one of the things, and if we think of what's happened at the Suez Canal with the billions of dollars that were lost per day, could you imagine the dependency on getting imports? And now I heard an article where they're saying, okay, well, the downstream impact of that, those days of the canal being blocked, is going to come on us as the end customer. Right? So I feel it's all well and good to be excited about the technology, and I would never block people from trying new things and making sure that the technology is there and, it glitters, but really that it makes sense for you. It really does make sense for you, even as don't scramble, pick the sense from the nonsense.
Yes, yes. Yes, but that certainly definitely requires you to then know your business and know your customer and know what you're about and all of the things that we've been talking about today.
Exactly.
And just my final question, Liselle, and probably just to sort of end on a positive note and to continue the data adventures, there are some tips or recommendations that you could make to businesses. What would you say?
The first one, and I'm laughing at myself because it will still sound negative, but it's positive. And you know what? I'll say it in a better way. Respect your boundaries. Like, don't be afraid to say no. What has happened a lot is that people are willing to take on a lot of business or things that don't make sense to them. And when I say it, it's like this. The example I'd give is, so you're doing a bathroom renovation, and you have a shower. The person designed for a shower, they want a bathtub. In these days, getting something shipped, if it's not right there in the Caribbean, in Trinidad, wherever you are, it's going to be difficult. Don't be afraid to say, you know what, no, I can't do this now. Maybe we could do it a little later. Like, respect your time and your energy to be able to get a project. You don't want to end up in trying to please people that the quality is lost. I would say that, and I know that I guess I keep going back to project more than data. I would say make sure that you even understand mine your own data with in terms of your business, etc. So if you think of the products and the sales and what might be important, again, you understand your customer. You should be able to capture the data that allows you to then look and say, okay, you know what, we got this product, but people aren't liking it as much as we could. Either you ask what may be preferred, or based on your own analysis or understanding of your customer and your data, be able to make a change. And this is not, you don't need a big tool for it. This is just understanding your data, looking through your receipts, looking at the products that you've bought and getting a sense of it. Like, know that you already have a rich wealth of data, and it's just to make sure that you put a framework around that and you understand it in order to continue to do that feedback loop, so to speak, to improve your business. So don't think that data is out there, that you have data available to you that you can take full advantage of. And even if it's just starting with a simple spreadsheet and putting down your products, keep records. Like, you have a lot of times we rely on the QuickBooks and the whatever to print out the receipts, but make sure that you can now put the information related to your product or service and really understand what that means. Understand, okay, maybe my business with doing stuff for HR is doing more than my business with making masks. So perhaps, I use this part of the business to make sure that I have a steady income, and I could figure out the number of hours that I attach to that in a week and cover up my basic bills. But you know what? I have a passion for masks. So I want to make the time because I want to create these beautiful pieces of art because that's my skill. So, you have the data is there, use it. and don't feel that just simple record keeping can't bring value.
That's so true. But Liselle, as much I wanted to sort of pursue that, but I think we'll have to leave that for another time, because it just opened up so many questions for me in terms of, how could, help somebody to understand how to set up some of those systems, because I think people sometimes just feel so overwhelmed about, just by setting up those basic systems in their business that could help them. But that I think we'll have to mine another time. So just thank you just so much for coming on, and for us to reconnect with you and your data adventures to date, and for even helping us to understand some the nuances of important aspect of data quality and data integrity as well. So thank you again.
My absolute pleasure. It's always great having a conversation with you, and I hope that your audience and the ICT family really was able to gain value on our conversation. So thank you for the opportunity.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com or drop us a note on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ICTPulse, or via Twitter @ICTPulse. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.